Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Rebecca Ahmed. It's great to have you join us today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
As am I. I'm very excited to have the conversation. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
Love this question, and I've kind of got a two-parter for it. So, I am now the oldest of 11, but obviously, as I grew up, children kept coming. So, I wasn't always the oldest of 11. But my mom likes to share I probably had a brother on a hip and a broom in the other hand at like 2 years old. Being that my brother and I are only a year and a few weeks apart, at least brother number two. But in terms of money and my understanding of that, so my dad's from Pakistan. We came from a traditional family where he's a cardiologist, and my mother decided to be the homemaker and mother of all of us children. And my concept that I really got to the first, I would say, exposure was when I was in Pakistan. I was 7 years old, and my dad took me to Pakistan for a month, which, coming from Las Vegas, coming from the United States, is very different. Going to a little town outside of Karachi and meeting my family for the first time. I didn't speak Urdu, new smells, new colors, new culture. And I remember distinctively, like if I close my eyes, I can even smell the spice market. But I saw a person with no legs asking for money for the first time. And I grew up in a suburban area, so I had never seen a spice market like this or even been exposed to poverty. And so I asked my dad, why is this gentleman on the floor asking for money and why does he have no legs? And my dad probably just made up a story. I'm 7 years old. He probably just was like, let me tell her whatever. But my understanding of a male figure at the time was that they provide for their family. So I asked my dad, how can he provide for his family? Obviously, assuming he had a family, right? I'm 7 years old. I'm making an assumption that every family has kids coming out of the wazoo. And my dad said he probably couldn't. And I asked my dad how much legs cost in Pakistan, and he told me $100. He probably, again, pulled that number out of nowhere. But I asked him, can I have that? Because I want this man to be able to go purchase legs and support his family. And I share this story, and I share the story even on my website because it's my first glimpse of understanding like curiosity. I didn't come from a place of assumption. I didn't come from a place as, ooh, this is wrong, or oh, this is, you know, anything destructive in terms of energy. It was all from a place of like, how can I help? And how can we help? And where can we solution orient? And I think that's just a part of me when when I shared this story originally with some people. They're like, oh my goodness, Rebecca, that explains you kind of to a T. And I say that's the first parter because my parents got divorced when I was 11 years old. And at that time, I was the oldest of seven. And their divorce was very tumultuous. And we no longer had access to funds while they were having their fight. And I went to my tennis instructor at 11 years old and said, how much do you pay to teach, to coach? Because usually we went to tennis academy every single summer. And he said, $6.50 an hour. I believe it was right around 6, 7. And I said, I'd like to coach this summer versus attending. Please don't share that with my parents because they're going through enough already. But I want to be able to support our family while we're trying to figure this out and navigate it. And I started working then. I started tutoring shortly after. And so by 11 years old, I was making money, and at the time paying. My focus was our babysitter, which you're going to laugh, but that tells you like she was our like grounding while my parents were in such a tumultuous place. And that was our lifeline, right? Of like food, of comfort, of getting our homework done was our babysitter. And so I wanted to make sure that she had the funds she needed while they figured out everything else. So I wanted to share that because that tells you a little bit about my exposure to money, especially at a young age, and why I believe in working so hard and putting yourself in the right place to be able to support yourself. I'm
That's not the typical money story we hear.
sure it's not.
Did your parents teach you anything about how to make money or how to build wealth, or was it just this desire because you had the need that you just went out and started to figure it out?
I started to figure it out because I realized dad had the money, dad supported the family. Mom didn't make her own money, that being a mother, unfortunately, does not equal a paycheck. And so you don't have control. And I learned, I think the control aspect is where it came in. Throughout my life from there, I have mentors that helped me with investing, right? I have a couple different properties I own and I'm in real estate, but those were different factors and different friends and family members that assisted. But my actual parents, no, it came from a place of lack of control at a young age and saying, how can I jump in and support?
Interesting. And I'm assuming school taught you little to nothing?
No, they never do, right? Like, I mean, I love my schools, but like, we still haven't gotten that curriculum right in any school that I've even still work with and partner with and communicate with. I think the speakers bring that, but there needs to be courses around this. And I still have not seen it done successfully, or really in a thorough set where you're talking to students from a very young age. So they have a good relationship with money.
And that is a big part of it. And it's you didn't mention this, but it seems like there is some sort of an energetic connection to money with you.
Absolutely, right? So when I look at money, when you have a constructive energy with money and a relationship with money, you understand the value of it, but it's not coming from a place of ego. It's coming from a place of needs, then desires, community. How do you help others? There's so many things that you can do in a constructive way with money, just like you can do in a destructive way with money. But when I look at it, like a relationship with money and a healthy relationship with money is very energetically fulfilling in so many ways.
Interesting. So you grow up, your parents get divorced, you start working. What happened next?
Yeah, so I started working at 11. I started tutoring. I graduated from high school. I worked throughout high school. I worked throughout college. I went to the University of Southern California. A crazy Trojan, fight on. Worked throughout that, and I went and got my master's as well and worked throughout my master's. I've always worked. It's been something that I've had a lot of joy in doing. I found a lot of passion, a lot of purpose. And what I loved about all of these jobs throughout the way is I learned a lot about what I didn't want to do, right? What wasn't energetically fulfilling me, so that you can start making shifts throughout your lifetime at a very young age to say, "Ooh, I dabbled in this and this is my takeaway that I liked and this is what like drained me. So let me make adjustments so when I try the next thing, I can make adjustments accordingly." And you slowly start figuring out your way. At the time, I didn't know my values. I didn't know the importance of values. And that's something I preach so much. And you saw in the book is that that would have saved me a lot of time, money, energy along the way. And that's why I like to help people with that. But my journey was about trial and error. And working was always at that forefront, which provided me a financial support.
And you spent a lot of time in the HR space, correct?
Absolutely. Yep. I was in the HR space for, I would say, in corporate about 10 years. And then with consulting, I'm still always helping different people success and people services teams best support the people of their organizations to energetically motivate them.
So what drew you to HR?
Yeah, it's interesting because what I didn't realize throughout all of these jobs is what I really loved is the human interaction. I love inclusive environments. I love working with diverse people from all intersectionalities. I've worked internationally, I've worked all over the US. And that connection with people, hearing their stories really drives me. And I kind of fell into HR, to be honest. I was consulting for hotels and casinos coming from the sales side of things, and an organization said, "Oh, you really understand customer experiences, you understand the 5-star requirements for properties. I would like to for you to help train our current employees, but we're also shifting our property from a 2-star hotel to a 4-star hotel, and so we need to hire new talent." And so hiring falls under HR. So all of a sudden I became a recruiter. All of a sudden I became a trainer, where I used to really provide recommendations on more of a business consultant perspective. And once Sanctuary Hotel, which was in New York City, once they brought me in, I became on the corporate side, that face of HR. And they're just, it really resonated with me, selling something of a career, selling like this is what you get to do by working for an organization and building your lifestyle that you dream of. And that's when Cosmopolitan reached out, and I went back to Las Vegas and kind of grew from there in terms of big HR, I would say, like large corporations.
And what took you from there to more of this energetic energetic impact that you're working on?
Yeah, so in 2018, I was working for Pinnacle Entertainment, and Boyd and Penn Gaming purchased Pinnacle Entertainment. So we did a $2.8 billion merger and acquisition to both of those locations. We had around 16 to 17 properties. And I took a step back and said, wow, I've done a lot in HR, including a huge M&A. Where do I want to go from here? What's going to excite me next? And at this time, there were a lot of changes in my life going on personally. So I took a step back and I went to the Landmark Forum. And if you haven't been familiar with the Landmark Forum, it's a great program. It's for personal and professional development. And one of the exercises of the program is to ask anyone and everyone you know, if you could be summed up in one word, what would it be? And that one word everyone gave me was energy. Energy, energy, energy. Oh my gosh, Rebecca, your energy. And I thought, wow, if I could really understand my energy and share this with people, how to get more energy to be able to accomplish their goals, how beautiful would that be, right? How much could I help other people coming from a place of service? And so I went to IPEC for a year and joined their program and got their certification, made sure I was ICF certified, and opened Energetic Impact and started speaking, coaching, consulting, and obviously wrote the book, The Energy of Success, to share the wealth of knowledge and experience I can give to people so they can have more energy in their personal and professional lives.
So let us chat about the book. What inspired you to write the book, The Energy of Success?
I think it was that journey, right? To start, I had a best friend. So my boyfriend from 11 years old to 18. So all of middle school and high school, Chad Goffstein, his father, Bobby Goffstein, was a huge part of my life. When I shared a person who influenced me in terms of money and real estate, he was a big mentor for me. He unfortunately passed during COVID.
Mm.
But he was a huge personal mentor for me. And when I met him at 11 years old, he said, if you could do anything, Rebecca, what would you do? And I said, I want to be a writer. I would love to write about different experiences. And I didn't really know where that would go. And he was a big avid traveler as well. And so he said, too, oh, these are all my books that I wanted to write. And these are all my notes in different books. And we would always exchange books. And so I always knew I wanted to write. I just didn't know about what. But as I grew through this learning of energy and applying these principles and coaching clients and helping organizations, it became very clear like the energy of success. How do you make yourself successful, both personally and professionally? How do you make your team successful? How do you make your organization successful? So it very much just aligned with the work I was doing, all stemming from that 11-year-old vision of being a writer.
You know, it's funny because we're talking about energy and energy of success, and it's all still coming back to business and money. A lot of times I notice in this space, it tends to be very woo woo, but you don't seem to bring that out at all.
Nope, I don't. And that's something I'm glad you called that out, because when I was speaking with publishers at first, they said the same thing. They said, I was expecting this to be woo woo. And it's very data driven and it's very down to the dollars of how an organization can be more effective so I can show an ROI. And it's probably because I worked in people success my entire life, or people services, because you need to show why training, why tools, why communication impacts an organization in a profitable way. It's not going through the actions, it's not a checkbox. It's here's how we change the makeup of our organization, and here's why it will help our organization energetically, which equals dollars. And at the end of the day, energy is a modern day currency. It's money, right? So it's, you want more of that. And when you can see that increase in your company, you put where your I would say energy behind it.
And that makes sense. So let's talk about it. In the book, you talk about personal energy.
Mhm.
What exactly does personal energy mean?
Yep. So personal energy is the amount or a vigor or capacity you bring to a situation. I love that if you look at the scientific definition of energy, it's movement, it's work. And there's the stored energy versus moving energy, but we can use that same definition for personal energy. How much are you putting behind something? And is it constructive or is it destructive? Does it build you up or does it drain you? And when you look at it through those two lenses, it's quite clear. Oh, I understand when I'm energetically driven or I'm drained. And then we can break it down into the seven zones so you can understand it better.
And so I was going to ask you that next, and you kind of started to allude to it. Can you give us an example of constructive versus destructive energy?
Absolutely. So when you are experiencing destructive energy, there are a couple things that are going on with your body, with your head, with how you respond. And so the first way you usually respond, I call it the safety zone because literally your brain is telling you be safe. Don't take that risk. And we always are using this in some way, shape, or form. You look both sides before you cross the street. You think before you speak. You think before you act. It's coming from a place of, am I safe? However, a lot of times, because you want to be kept safe and our brains are really triggered to do that and actually set up for that, you might go into self doubt, fear, avoidance. Ooh, I don't want to deal with that. It comes from a place of lethargy and draining because you want to stay very, very safe. And so that's destructive because if you're never stepping out of that when you need to step out of it, you're never going to accomplish your goals. So that's one way of experiencing that. And if you're feeling that lethargy, if you're looking through the lens of self doubt and fear, that's destructive energy. The other energy that's destructive is combative energy, that fighting. And it can be used. All of these energy levels have advantages and disadvantages. A lot of times we talk about, ooh, I can power through. I love to operate in stress. Some people say that. That's great, but it's not a sustainable type of energy. How long can you run through quicksand? You can't. There's only so much you can give. And so when you're experiencing that, especially one on one with your team in a workplace, you see that there are breakdowns. That's destructive. It's literally breaking down your communication, breaking down your collaboration, and breaking down everything you need to accomplish your goals. Where the opposite occurs with that constructive energy. You lead with curiosity versus assumptions. You have synergy and collaboration versus silos. You start having innovative hits versus feeling stuck and saying, I don't see anything differently. That's where constructive energy really starts to come in, and you start to see that flow, like Csikszentmihalyi shares, that you're like, oh, I'm engaged. Time just flew by. I'm having creative thoughts. I'm excited. I have passion and joy. Those are the differences that you really start to feel.
And that's a choice, right? We get to choose that.
It is a choice. And this is where people have a hard time understanding that perception is so connected to energy. And when you understand that you can choose to be angry. I tell my clients all the time, if you want to sit in anger, own that. Own that you're sitting there. I've done that now. I'll say to my family members, to a client, right now I'm upset and I want to sit here with this and understand what I'm processing. Power of the pause, and then I'll follow up with a thoughtful response. The difference is when you let your energy control you, especially in destructive energy, when you're not in control, that's when you start doing things and you have regrets. You're like, oh my goodness, I wasn't in control of that. Like my energy took control of me. So by shifting that perspective and saying, here's where I am and here's where I want to go, then we can create action steps to get you there.
Now, you mentioned there's seven zones of energy. Can you briefly touch on what that is?
Yep. So we touched on those two, the safety zone being level one, coming from a place of fear, self doubt. Then we go into that combative zone, level two, where you want to really fight, you want to be more aggressive with other people. Level three is that compromise zone. This is that bridge going from destructive to more constructive energy. The word I like to use that we see everyone use, especially during COVID, how's life? It's fine. How's home? Fine. How's work? Fine. When you start saying fine, you are on cruise control. That is the compromise zone. That's level three. Level four is coming from that place of service. When you think about others before yourself and you're really leading with that empathy and that connection to others. Level five is that curiosity zone. And this is where you start to see destructive energy completely disappear because you're leading through a lens of everyone wins. When curiosity is at the forefront, you're always looking at any challenge through a lens of opportunity. And then from there, you get to the creative zone, which is level six. That's that flow, that's that synergy. And then you can start having hits of that climax zone, that aha, oh my goodness, I just had an innovative hit. I just had an out of body experience. I experienced so much joy. I laughed, I cried all at the same time. Those moments, that's that level seven energy.
Interesting. And it seems to be similar to energy kind of zones that are also on the other side. And I don't know what the right word for them is. Um, it's not so much spiritual, but just, and there are other zones of energy that they talk about. And I can't remember what the correct name for them is, but it seems to go from safety and anger to much more love and acceptance and everything else. So it seems to be very similar to that.
It probably has a lot of synergies. When you look at energy, I mean, energy is energy at the end of the day. And so my teachings come from Bruce Schneider at IPEC. And what I did is really summarize them into zones so that people can understand, oh, these are my thoughts. These are my feelings. These are my actions. So now I can identify it. Once you understand where you're at, then you can understand where you want to go. But I'm sure there's a lot of synergy between spiritual application and personal energy and even scientific energy because they are all energy at the end of the day.
Makes sense. So how does this play out in the workplace? How do we use this to increase our profits?
Yes. So, in the energy of success, I loved how I could show so many examples of this. So, I definitely recommend diving in. I know you have, but for those listening, dive in because you'll get to see client A, client B. Here was the conversation. Here's where we made the shift because I really wanted it to make sure that people could see it from all lenses and all perspectives. So, it really depends on the situation you're experiencing. For instance, if you're experiencing an angry customer coming at you and you're at a customer service role, it's very easy to wear that energy and then want to spread it to other people. How many times has any person listening said, "Oh, someone came at me and I just like spewed it on the next person," right? Like, oh, I just let's like and you start to, it's almost like a wildfire buildup because now that person is like, "Oh, someone got angry at me. Now I'm going to give it to the next person, the next person." And so one of my examples is this principle of detachment. Empathize with the person. I hear you. I understand you're upset. Here are the things I can assist you with, or here's where I can get you to get assistance. And then having that moment with yourself and saying, is this my energy to wear? I like to explain it like a coat. Take that coat off. Before throwing that coat on someone else or a piece of that coat, take it off. Empathize and release. And that's one of the five energetic success principles so that people can be with other people, but then also not carry that energy.
Again, it comes back to choice.
It comes back to choice. Mhm.
It's funny because when I was in sales, angry customers were great because if you could solve their problem, they would hand you money. And
Absolutely.
you always wanted somebody because if they were angry, they were willing to make a change.
Mhm.
People who were fine weren't even listening to you, right? They're just like, whatever. They're sitting in that space and they're not even thinking about it. Do you find a lot, especially since you were in HR, and I know today that seems to be the big issue is connecting and finding people who are engaged at work, and creating that. Do you find a lot of people are just resigned? Maybe is that the right word? They're just kind of going through the motions, but they're not at all energetically inspired in their work.
Absolutely. And I think it's very important that we look at this through a detailed lens because the media has done a really great job of I would say selecting terminology like the quiet quitter and or lazy job girls. Like I love Gabriella Judge and what she stands for, but they've taken it from a lens of this is destructive versus it's nuanced. I will take a quiet quitter who is giving 100% of their energy, their engagement at work, and then completely finishes their day and goes home and does exactly what they want to do all day long. All day long. Can you imagine having all of your employees engaged 100%? That's a dream for any company. This idea that being a lazy job girl or being a quiet quitter, that you're not engaged, that's actually not the definition. The definition is that they give exactly what's required at work. They're not going above and beyond. And so coming from HR where you're getting most people giving 30% maybe, like I would love 100%. So like I want to start with that. So I think that's a different level of disengagement because they might be engaged, but they're not engaged to the point of passion where they want to give 110%. And that is still very, very good. And so I think that's where we need to start making differentiators of you have those people who do want to give above and beyond. They're very passionate about their role, and that becomes really one of their like core values. But then you have people who want to give exactly what they should give. They do a great job at their work, and then they leave work, and that's no longer part of what they're looking to like do the rest of the day. And then you have people who are disengaged. And those people that are disengaged, Rocky, those are the challenges, right? Because they are skirting by, they're not doing their work, and they're pulling down the productivity of the organization and the energy so that they're not able to accomplish their goals, not able to accomplish their mission. That's the focus area. And when I work with organizations, I almost look at it like a hotspot map because I pull out the red areas and say, this is where you have disengagement. And these are the areas we need to focus on. And how is that impacting the rest of the organization?
And a lot of times, I guess, and I see it in corporate, people get fed up because they don't feel like they can make a difference.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, in a sense, creates the disengagement.
Do you blame them?
No, I
No, of
don't.
course not. Yeah, me
I
neither.
don't. I was one.
Yeah, I have been too. In my preface in my book, I share I have been every type of employee. I have been your greatest employee. I have also been your annoying employee. I have been your disengaged employee. I have been your middle of the road employee. I've been them all because based on how I chose to energetically connect. And also, where did I want to place my energy? If I didn't think I was going to be heard, if I didn't feel I could make a change, what could I change? I could change where I wanted to be. I could change my job. I could change anything. So I looked at it from that lens. Give 100% and then go find a job that's going to give you more energy and excitement if you're not going to be heard.
So let's look at it from the other side of the table, and that is from the hiring side. Because you talk a little bit about that in the book, and I'd like to get your thoughts. And I guess there's two parts. One, do we look at their energy for the particular position? And then how do we also look at people appropriately for good fits? Because what I have found and what I've heard, I read a book called Top Grading, and a big part of that book is people hire people that they like, not that are competent and can do the job.
Which bias comes in?
Which bias comes in. So yeah, I'd love for you to talk about that.
Yep. So I do look at the job from a fit and from a skill set. And so skill set is skill set. It's not about do you like this person? It's about do they meet the minimum qualifications of the role and can they succeed in the role? Or can you train them to get to those? Because there are a lot of roles that you can train into. Obviously, a doctor is not one of those roles. If it requires education and a certification and passing, that's very different. But a lot of roles that we're looking at, you can train to that skill set. So it's important to know that if that's one of those roles and if you're a leader willing to do that. But from the fit side, I find that there's a couple different things you need to hone in on. One, what are your company core values? If you align your culture with your company core values, you have criteria that you're evaluating a person's fit on. Are they in alignment with your core values or not? That will tell you then if they're a fit for the organization or not. If you are evaluating them based on that criteria, that's not bias. That's an actual criteria that you're set up and you're evaluating them based on that and asking them, how do you bring this value to life? Is this a value that's important to you or not? And if it's not an important value to you, why or why not? And will that impact the organization's success? For instance, creativity is a big one. If companies, a lot of companies have that word innovation and creativity became a very big buzzword, right? Like I think, but pre-COVID, that was like a big buzzword. Back in like the 80s, that was a word that they never put as a criteria, which I found very interesting. But that's not what they wanted. And so if your organization isn't looking for creativity and innovation, they're looking for someone to really just be process driven. You need to make sure that you're meeting and hiring people that enjoy being process driven versus being in the creative space and more innovative. You need to understand that, because if you place someone who loves to be more of an innovative space, a creative space, but they're not process driven, and you place them in that role, they're going to hate it. Their energy is going to be drained. And so this is where you need to look at cognitive diversity for any type of project. Are you hitting all of those buckets? Do you have the numbers person? Do you have the emotional person? Do you have the big picture person? Do you have the process person? That's how you can ensure that even in the hiring process, what do you need for your team? And how will that make your energy work smoothly together to accomplish your goals?
As you were saying that, I'm almost thinking of a disc profile, because it is there overlap between, I know there's overlap, but can you tie certain things together with some of these different personality profiles, or it's not really that type of a relationship?
It is that type of relationship. You hit it right on the head. I like to use the HBDI assessment a lot of times because it speaks to cognitive diversity. And when you have a team that represents the four quadrants of how we think, that's that emotional, big picture, process, and numbers, you have energetic synergy amongst the team, and everyone knows where they stand and the perspective they're coming from. When you don't know that, you don't understand why the numbers person is getting mad at the emotional person. And then you have breakdowns. But if everyone understands the lens that they're seeing the world through, then they can get into each other's shoes and say, okay, I thought about it through this lens of yours. And here's how I'm going to like make this work. What are your thoughts? Then you're building each other. Then you're constructive versus breaking down and saying, I don't understand why they think like this, which happens all the time. We just forget to have that conversation on the front end. What are your values? How are you coming at this? What is your perspective, so we can align and we can get to where we want to go?
What percentage of companies know their core values and then exemplify their core values?
Oh, I wish I could give you a number on this. I would love to give you a number on this. Because I think almost every company now, or most companies, have stated core values. Now, how have they put them to life? That's the difference. A mural on a wall is very different than executing them throughout your policies and practices. And as you see Gen Z coming in, that's their number one question. How do you bring your core values to life? They'll ask every single person that they interview with, including the executive team, because they want to ensure that if they're going to join an organization, they're in line with their core values. And then if they're giving their 8 hours to an organization, that it's in line with their vision and mission. And so if you're not a company living by your core values, I would definitely recommend putting that at the forefront and focusing on that, because that gives you direction and that also gives your future talent direction.
I tend to work with smaller businesses, and in the smaller business space, most of them don't define their values. I know them, but they don't define them.
Mm-hmm.
And then more often than not, they aren't necessarily exemplifying them. But really, I think the biggest disconnect comes is they tend to hire for skills and not to their values. And then they have this mess on their hands. And we keep telling them, be clear on your values, exemplify your values, and hire to your values. You can always teach skills. But, if you're the type of company that wants everyone there on time every morning, and you're not exemplifying that, or you're not hiring to that, then there's some people who are always late. they're never going to fit in. And if it's going to drive you crazy, then know that up front. And I'm just using a basic one. Clearly, you know much more complex examples than that, but you've got to bring that all together. And I found that companies that have real clarity on their core values and they're fun and they hire to them, they turn they become amazing organizations. I mean, and that's kind of the book Good to Great, right? It was kind of along those lines too, I think.
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's even more important when you're at the smaller focus to have those core values so then you know how you want to grow and you build sustainable business practices in line with those core values. That's the miss, right? That's where we see so many smaller organizations not make it because they never did that core foundational focus in the beginning. And I think I remember connecting with Zappos right when they had just moved to Las Vegas. And it's funny because I was like, I have his book right here, and may he rest in peace. But I think to the creation of Zappos and why they created Zappos and their core values, and as they grew, how they had to various times say, wait a minute, is this in line with our core values? If we do this partnership with Amazon, if we expand or if we jump into back into holacracy, like they chose to go into a holacracy total focus based on our core values was that like everyone is multidimensional. Everyone has that creative space so they can do multiple hats or wear multiple jobs. And by doing that, they were able to create sustainable business practices for the long run. So I think more than anything, for smaller organizations, that should be at your forefront every single time. And it might shift as you grow. You might say, okay, we are going to make these adjustments, but it's a conscious decision. It's not, holy cow, our energy has gotten away from us and we really don't know who we are as a brand, who we are as a company, and then who do we attract, right? That's I think that even individuals know that now. If you don't know what your core values are, you kind of feel like you're just aimlessly going through life because you're not really focused on where you want to go.
And that is very, very correct. And that's why I always tell people you've got to define what they are.
Yeah.
And you got to write them down and be clear on it because a lot of people aren't clear on what they want. You know, it's funny. Speaking of Zappos, I'm in a Tony Robbins business program, and they were talking about Tony, who started
Yeah, Tuna
Zappos.
Shay, yeah.
Yeah, and they gave an example. He's like, Tony knows everybody. He's like, I guess they were at some party, and this woman's drunk, and she's like, I want pizzas. And he's telling this story about how she calls Zappos and says, I want pizzas. And they're like, do you know who you're calling? And she's like, yes. And you're supposed to make me happy. Right. Cause that's, and
I mean, Tony
I,
Shay did write the Happiness Project.
right. And so literally Zappos took her credit card number and ordered her pizzas and had them delivered. And the funny part of the story though was he was there listening to this go down. So he's like, I wonder how my customer service person is going to deal with this situation.
Yep. But that's the brilliance behind Tony Shea and why he built that culture because he had an all hands on deck type of policy. He had where if you joined the organization and you didn't align with the culture, they would pay you to leave within the first 6 months because they knew their core values so strongly. And what I loved, and I love this example because it ties back to Vegas, Rocky, is like Vegas, you're used to getting anything and everything at all hours. So I love that he kind of doubled down on that to be like, call Zappos. Even if they sell something else, they'll get you a pizza in true Vegas fashion. They'll figure it out. It so aligns with like who they are and honestly who we are as like as a city and as a culture. It's just that's just a great story because it really does tie back to like our core values as Las Vegas.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. Las Vegas doesn't advertise that, right? They advertise what happens in Vegas stays in
Stays in Vegas, yes. I always just our hospitality is like one in a million, right? Like the hospitality that you experience in Las Vegas is something that I believe is best practice around the world. I've been all over the world. I shouldn't say all over, but I've been a lot of places around the world. And hospitality in Vegas is something that is spoken about consistently, and it's something to experience for sure. And so I think
Mm.
it's very it warms my heart when I hear that that's coming from other organizations within the space, because it's very much connected to who we like to be.
Has that shifted post COVID? Because I'll be honest, we go out a lot, we travel a lot. And what we have noticed in the hospitality space, both local and everywhere, is um, places are closed more often. They're short staffed, and service has gone downhill.
Yep. I agree with you. I do agree with you. What I will say, there's a couple, again, nuances within that. So, do I believe that hospitality and that true hospitable experience still exists? Absolutely. And I can rattle off so many places that do it with such finesse. Where does that come from? The company's core values. And so if you're not experiencing that, like any type of role post COVID, that gave people that reflection to say, is this in line with my values? Is this energizing me? Am I being paid my worth? Which goes back to core values, because if you're not being paid your worth, why would you want to give great experiences? Why would you be at work? Why would you work those hours? And so I believe that hospitality especially, when you look at the restaurant industry, we need to look at that compensation model, because that compensation model is not serving them, and it's not serving the industry. And we're going to have to make a shift there. Asking cooks, I mean, I remember this, like asking cooks to work 12 hours and they're being paid minimum wage, and
Mm.
a lot of hours not even compensated. I mean, I meet so many people in practice, they're like, oh, we just have to work. That's not integrity, that's not authenticity, that's not respect for people. So there is that challenge, not just with hospitality, but I think you see it first and forefront because the guest experiences it. You experience when someone's frustrated, you experience when someone's overly worked, you experience when someone's underpaid. And so that is where we need to make a shift within the industry, so that you will see places open longer because people are being compensated accordingly, and people are coming to use that business because they love the service they're getting. So it's
Yeah,
both.
and I mean, I think the bigger thing that we're seeing is just they're having a very difficult time staffing
Yeah.
and getting people who want to do that. So, especially in the business world, how much does ego, power play, dynamics, all of that kind of, all the control and ownership and everything else kind of play to all of this?
Ego plays a big role in a lot of challenges. Anytime you see that directives are coming from, let's say, one person or a group of people, and they're representative of an entire organization, that's not going to be the actual organization. That's ego, right? Saying that we conducted a survey, we've had conversations, we have ensured that our action plans are in line with our values and our vision, and you're part of this no matter how big your organization. That's synergy, that's collaboration. And so quite quickly if your ego's in the way or not, or you can tell when an organization has an ego in the way because it's not coming from their people.
It's funny when you talked about surveys because I remember, and I see this all the time. They'll send out surveys, and the response of the surveys from the people on the front lines is leadership sucks. And then they go, oh, their managers are not doing their job, so let's whip them. Instead of going, oh, the executive steering committee, C suite is not doing its job. It they don't take ownership of it. And it's like, why'd you bother with the survey when you don't want to listen to the results?
Oh, 100%. Why would you even fill it out if you know your results aren't going to be listened to? That was like the question you asked me in the beginning. You can share feedback, but if it's not taken, what do? You say, I move on. That's my choice. I'm not going to stay here because it's not resonating. But yes, it has to come. And I've been very fortunate to work with very strong executive suites that are very, very checked in, understand who their people are, who the organization is, and they are not ego driven. And they are driven by those values and they are connected consistently. And when you see survey results coming in at 99% responded, it's because every single manager has an action plan and those are communicated and teams are built and we're constantly working on them and it's transparent and it's personalized. And there's a beautiful and energetic way to do that. And then there's a way that a lot of people send the survey to the abyss and see where it goes. Like,
And I'm guessing that you wouldn't work for one of those other corporations that didn't have that
I
because you
wouldn't
don't need
if I
it.
were on the corporate side. No, I would
Yeah.
I would probably only on the consulting side if they're looking to make a shift. If they're saying we're doing this for check the box, I would say thank you so much for considering working with me, but in line with my values and what I give to organizations, I want to be able to be successful for your company too. And I don't do check the box exercises. Like that's just a waste of time and energy for me. So I won't even take your paycheck. Like by all means, keep it.
And I am very much in line with you. You know, a lot of people ask me, what's your niche?" And I'm like, I don't go by the standard demographic niches. I go by psychographic niches. And so I want to work with people who I like and who show up in certain ways. Otherwise, I don't want anything to do with it. And I won't return the calls or we'll just kind of stay away from it.
And that's
And
in
I don't
line with that
attract them.
value practice, right,
Yeah.
Rocky? Like instead of putting it down to like the demographics, it's that value. And I always like Cosmopolitan was one of my first big organizations I worked for. And they attracted the curious class and the curious class on the customer side as well as the employee side. And we called ourselves co-stars. And all of the ads, we're literally focused on that from both sides to ensure that we got people that led with curiosity and that wanted to come and look at things from a different lens and really get into like intersectionalities and the diversities of art, culture, food, people, all of those exciting things. But that's that psychographic that you're talking about. So I love that call out.
And so one of the other things that you talked about in the book, and I think it's something that you might have also struggled with, was the curse of a busy packed schedule and creating the downtime. And like I know on my calendar, it won't let anyone go book back to back.
Mhm.
Like there's automatic downtimes behind everything.
Yep.
Just to ensure that I'm not crushed. And I think that also helps with energy because if you're just going from place to place and you're always behind, it kind of creates a mess. And I think you told the story about that, didn't you?
I did. And I have helped so many clients create energetic breaks. I've had to label them even as energetic breaks because of this emotion and bias that people have with self care, that term. I like to compare it to plugging in your cell phone. Does anyone you know plug in their cell phone when it's dying and get jealous of it? Are they ever like, oh, you're getting a recharge? No, it's like my phone can't work if it's not charged in. You're the same way. Like, this is not, oh, they went and relaxed or took a 15-minute meditation. How dare they? It's like, no, they plugged in. Like, we've got to redefine this relationship with energizing ourselves because when you think about how successful you can be in anything that you do, if you don't have the battery to do it, you are giving half battery, quarter battery, yellow battery, mayday, about to turn off energy. That's not successful and it's not going to be contributive. It's not creating an impact. And so that's why it's so important to really understand that you have to be at these full battery charges or high battery charges, depending on the task at hand, to be able to give your best foot forward. And I use exactly what you say, Rocky. Like I explain to people there's automatic ways to do this on your calendar. You need to put them in however you are driven. If it's an accountability partner that you need to go and have a walk with this certain time of day, whatever those are that drive you, that bring you joy, that's going to boost your energy. And especially those that lead with service, that's that service zone level energy 4. It's even more important for them because they love to give out their energy. And so I'm like, the more you give it out, the more you have to dole it back in.
And that's true. And I've learned to put blocks into the calendar and I've learned to look out ahead. So now if we travel and I'm gone for a week, I block the week before and after so nobody can book anything on my calendar. I'll still have
Mhm.
appointments, but I do it at my discretion. So things, because otherwise they get overbooked or I feel half the time it isn't that they're even overbooked. I feel that they're overbooked. And
Mhm.
so then I'm like, ah, so I've just learned put blocks. And actually, just recently, I did a new thing, which was to block Friday and
Mhm.
say, I'm no gonna put appointments on Fridays. I rarely put appointments Monday morning. So
I'm the
it got,
exact same way. I
yeah,
block my Monday mornings as best as possible and my Fridays, because those are times for me to get in my
yeah.
modes, get like kind of organized and set up. And I love that you call it the vacation piece because I have this leader and she said, Rebecca, it's as if starting Thursday before I leave on Saturday with my family, I'm all like, about to go on vacation, getting everything organized. She's like, the first few days, I'm still like slowly winding off the computer, still checking a few things. I know there was a last minute things. I might have a day or two of excitement. Maybe that's a Wednesday, Thursday. And now Friday, I'm going into, oh my gosh, I have to get ready for next week. And so you have 2 days of vacation in this one week. How does that serve you? How is that energetically recharging you? It's not. And so by building these blocks around it or looking even at your time off and taking more time off to make sure that you have sustainable business practices in place so you can re-energize is so important. Because if not, you need a vacation from your vacation.
Oh, well, we learned that when our kids were young and we took them on vacations, we we started doing 2 and 3 week vacations
Mhm.
because I found 7 days just didn't cut it. And
Yeah.
so more often we also found that if we got to 3 weeks, vacation became work. And so we just knew 2 weeks was perfect. If it was international, it was going to be about 2.5 to 3 weeks, just so that we had a couple days on either side for travel more
Hmm.
so than actual vacation. And
Yep.
and I've learned to watch and to block all of that. Speaking of companies, are you at all familiar with the Savannah Bananas?
I'm not.
Ah, okay.
I'll
You
have
want
to
to
look
talk
them
about a
up.
company with energy?
Ooh.
They are a baseball team. They're sold out. Like they're not even they're a minor league. They're not even minor league. They are percentage wise the most profitable baseball team out there.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm definitely going to
Percent
look
of
them up.
revenue. And they hire to their values. They don't have to worry about hiring. And the other thing that they do that's really neat is they took away all of the anxiety of going to a baseball game for a parent.
Okay.
In other words, high price tickets. You walk in, the kids want a hot dog and a drink. They charge one price. You walk in with your baseball ticket, your food's free. Like there are premium
Amazing.
things you can buy, but your kids can go get a hot dog and they can get a drink, and they've turned the fans and the team into entertainers. So
That's
they just
amazing.
it's
I
amazing.
definitely will look them up because even you saying that, understanding that your demographics or psychographic, like understanding their psyche, if that's what they're looking for, and you were able to meet their needs, how
Mhm.
much energy are you bringing to the game? How much energy are you bringing to, the company? Like that's beautiful.
If you watch their videos, they just exude energy.
Oh, great. Thank you for
It's
sharing. I
wild.
love recommendations.
No, you're more than welcome. One of the things that I noticed in the book, and it was funny that you mentioned it, and I noticed it's so true. In Europe, people don't define themselves by their work.
Mm-mm.
It's an
Yep, when I
American
moved to
thing.
actually, when I moved to Salamanca, I was in high school. It was my sophomore year, and my first time traveling, I would say alone. So I went with my friends. I went with my partner at the time. There was 8 of us that went, and we were taught in Salamanca, at the University of Salamanca, do not ask anyone in Europe what job they do. It's considered very rude. It's not about, it doesn't define who they are. If they'd like to share that information as they get to know you, it'll come out naturally. But that is a very American tendency to do. And I learned that. And it made me laugh because I remember one student, she shared, she did just naturally like forgot that and asked, what do you do? And they said, I ski, I eat. Like that was their answer because they didn't even go to work when they were asked, what do they do? They're like, I breathe. They went to literally, figuratively what they do. And I just think it's so beautiful because it's a piece of them, but it's not their defining values. It's not what they want to bring to the forefront. And if it is, that's also beautiful that they want to share that, but it's not, it's not defining is the only thing about them. When you look at that circle of life, there's so much that comes every person brings to the table. And so you should bring all of you to the table, right? You should have that harmony. And that's the opportunity that we have to learn from them.
And that is so, so true. So what do you think is the future as people evolve, as we start to change? And then also along those same lines are now being more remote or being more disconnected at work from others. What are you predicting, or what do you kind of see happening?
Yeah, so chapter 12 goes into this because I'm looking at this through the lens of what are the values of Gen Z, primary values, right? Every person is individualized, but that's even one of their values, personalization. Like, ask me what I want, not don't make an assumption that all of us want this. So, that personalization and transparency, these are factors that are coming in. Authenticity. We have information at the tip of our fingers. If you're going to hide something from a company, a Gen Z person is going to find it. So Miles will be transparent about it and get in front of it, right? Flexibility. That's that hybrid remote. What works for one person might not work for another person. And when you look at the diversity statistics, we're able to see that that flexibility is increasing diversity and increasing engagement at work because of how different people work. I operate much better in the evening versus the day. Before I had to be at work at 7:38 in the morning. I don't have as much energy as then compared to like 12 to like 10. So if I can rearrange now that I get to run my own day, I know when my meetings are. You get me when I'm more energetically inclined to give and be engaged because I have that flexibility to do so. So when you look at that, the future of the workplace, I'm looking at it through the lens of the values of what our Gen Z is bringing because they are going to be the number one population in the workplace. Boomers, this is the first year boomers are no longer the number one leaders in terms of population in the workplace. So you're seeing a
Hmm.
huge shift, right? We're starting to see boomers retire. We're seeing Gen X start to take more of that leadership than millennials. And then you've got this Gen Z that's going to be the larger population. So we're going to start seeing those values shift from, year over year. But right now, mental health is the number one value for Gen Z. And they've gone through a lot of concerns around mental health. And so, with that at the forefront, companies are going to have to make shifts knowing if they don't, 65% already have their own business. They're not looking for a job then. If you're not able to welcome them in an environment that aligns with their values, they're opening up their own business. They're finding other ways to make money. So you won't have people come if you don't make the shift as an organization. And we'll just see organizations unfortunately die, but then we'll see new ones created. It's the circle of life in terms of business.
There is always the circle of life.
I'm doing a Lion King speech right now for a client, so I was like, "Oh, that came up real easily."
It's funny. Have you read this book, The Fourth Turning?
I haven't. I'll have to check it
Ah,
out.
The Fourth Turning is a Neil Howe book, and it is literally how we go through four generation cycles, and they are throughout history. So he's looking at all the things that we're seeing today, the disgruntledness and the conflicts and all of this stuff. He says, oh yeah, that's natural. You're in that part of the cycle. He goes, over the next 10 years, you're going to see that come to an end,
Mhm.
and the pendulum's going to swing back the other way. And it's Gen Z and the young generation kind of leading a more collaborative approach
Mhm.
going forward. So, as much as people may not like what's happening, it's going to change. And
We always grow, right? It's
yeah,
the evolution of life and the evolution of what we learn from. As Americans, I think we have to remember we're really young compared to a lot of a lot of other countries, and looking at their history and seeing the patterns that have occurred. My brother's a very big historian, and he always says that to me. Oh, this occurred this year. This occurred here. This was this war. He knows all the references,
yeah,
and I don't. And so I'll ask him, where has this occurred in history? How did it turn out? How did it impact now, and what can we learn from that? Right, like we can always take these learnings and apply them moving forward. And then how many times haven't we? How many times do we have to go through the same thing until it takes some time to learn? So that's the evolution.
that makes total sense.
Yep.
What's your secret to living an abundant life?
I lead with energizing happiness and pleasure and joy. And so when I think of an abundant life, I like to bring that in and ensure that not only am I projecting that, but I'm also receiving that. And that's a value I definitely lead with.
What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
You have power of choice to change your perspective, which impacts your energy. We place a lot of limiting beliefs on ourselves based on past traumas. And we like to, and I say we because I've done this, we like to place blame versus taking ownership of where we can make our own shifts. And even if that was a horrific experience, that doesn't mean that you need to add to that and focus on that blaming. You can add to where you took responsibility and where you want to go. It doesn't matter that external piece.
If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be?
Oh, and I love this because I'm always speaking at colleges, and that's what the Lion King speech right now is for a college. That was their theme, but I tell them to place energy behind value aligned decisions. So, one, discover your values, define your values, and then place constructive energy behind that to accomplish your goals with excitement, energy, and ease. 100%.
Perfect. If people would like to learn more about you or the book, where can they do that?
Yes, go to energeticimpact.com. That is my website. On there, you'll see all my social media. If you want to connect with me on LinkedIn or Instagram or TikTok, whatever your social media platform, I, of course, post almost every single day. So you can get little tips and tricks. But the hub is energeticimpact.com. And of course, the book is sold everywhere where books are sold. So that could be Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, your local retailer, whoever you like to support. And it will be coming out in Audible in September. But it is available now in hardback and Kindle and softback.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. This was so fun. Thank you for sharing your energy.
Thanks for checking out this unedited video of the Richer Soul podcast. You can find the full episode along with all the back episodes at richersoul.com. This podcast is brought to you by Profit Comes First, where we help business owners to have a more profitable and growing business so they can live the life of their dreams. Check that out as well wherever you listen to all this content.